In Song for Ruth, you write, "Love never says goodbye," which, you know, it's a line that I love because I think just that whole concept is so true. I mean, true love never says goodbye. It's never something that when you love someone, they're a part of you. And you can never, regardless of what happens, you can, that metaphor, it can never say goodbye. It can never not be a part of you once that's been an experience. And love is something that is always a part of us, and yet there's a feeling in the song that you are saying goodbye. And I'm wondering, is that, am I reading that right, or is the metaphor correct?
You're totally reading it right, that in Song for Ruth, love never says goodbye, one of the key lines in the song, is true. You know, as you pointed out, once love has struck your heart in some form, it's destined to be there, regardless of anything. It goes in and it stays. But I wrote this song, Song for Ruth, based on my father's, my father telling me about his love for my mother. When my mother passed, myself and my dad had a lot of talks about his love for her. And he related to me that he used to court her in the early years where she lived. He lived in the village, she lived in the city, so when they met, one of them had to part on the bus and go back to where it was a true courtship. And my father used to always look after they'd been out for the evening, he'd look on the bus when she'd pull away to go back to her house, and he'd look for her in the window and wave to her. And that was a big thing to him, you know. Beautiful story. And so the song starts with that saying goodbye. And they were very, very much in love. So when my father lost my mother, it was obvious to me, he talked about her as though she was still there. She was there. So love never says goodbye, and that was where that hit me. She wasn't physically there, but she was there. The love was in him. And
Always would be.
Yes, and the song has a kind of Celtic, very Scottish kind of romantic feel about it. And so it's the Song for Ruth is written through my father's eyes about my mother and the very romantic imagery he told me about their courtship in the early years. And as you say, I think it is a song of saying goodbye, but not saying goodbye.
Right.
Yeah,
so
totally.
As almost as a tribute or as a remembrance.
Totally.
A reflection.
Yes.
When Johnny sang the blues, to me, when I go through that song and I listen to it, knowing you, and especially knowing from what you've talked about now, it seems to be a song that's filled with images from your childhood.
Yes. You're on again.
Oh, well.
Johnny Sang the Blues is about looking back to that period when I was really knocked out with music, and it took over my life, which was when the Beatles hit in the 60s, and the whole feeling of what Liverpool was to us in England. Liverpool was a very special place because the Beatles came from there, and in the song I mentioned the River Mersey and the feeling of the cavern when you know they were singing their real rough songs, and I related it a little bit to John Lennon singing in the early days when they were really rough and ready in the blues and they were just rocking, and that great feeling of that time. It was an amazing time, and Johnny Sang the Blues is basically looking at how magical that time was, again in free thought. But it's a nostalgic look at a very, very special and influential time to me, which was really the Mersey sound, and how the Beatles, although they rocked out, it was also, to me, quite romantic period. So I tried to also make that song have a sense of the amazing romance of that period as well.
Yes, and there's a lightness in the way you reflect. You don't reflect darkly, you reflect lightly with an air of like happiness to it.
Well, it was a very, very happy time, a very influential time, and very special to me because I think that time, I feel lucky that I was born and grew up around that time when the music really changed and the Beatles appeared. Not only was it great songs, it was a change of everything in the way we saw TV, the way the government was in England, everything was influenced by these four lads from Liverpool. Everything changed. Fashion changed. Everything changed. And it was culture changed. It was a romantic time. And my influences come right across the board, from soul, as we said, to folk, to Celtic music. So Johnny Sang the Blues doesn't sound like the Beatles or in that space, but it does have that feeling of the romance of that time. I tried to create that in free thought, and for it to be up.
Yes.
To feel like, oh, this is just a special time. I don't analyze it too much. I just feel it. I want to put on the girl you're with, she has to put on her red shoes, meet her at the bus station or the train station, and we're going to dance. We might even go into the cavern, and we might catch the Beatles playing. They're not even big at this point, you know? They're just breaking, and it's rough and ready, and it's erupting. It's a new birth of music, and hit music hits. So you're right, that's where that song came from.